Good evening. Thank you for joining me. I'm so glad that you're here tonight. If you haven't already, please take a moment to sign in and let me know you're here. We need this documentation for our auditors. It isn't so we can come hunt you down, but it's for us to get a good count of how many people are here tonight. Thanks for doing this for us, and we hope that you learn lots of good things in our session tonight. My name is Kelly Rawl, and I am the coordinator for family engagement as well as pre-kindergarten. I hope that you will reach out to me and give me a call anytime you need to ask a question or ask for assistance. My facilitators and I have been fully trained by the creators of Practical Parent Education so that we can share this information with you. We in no way claim to be experts at parenting. We are all parents and grandparents and have made lots of mistakes along the way, which of course taught us many lessons. I think we call that trial by fire, right? Does anybody have any questions before we get started? I don't have anyone helping me tonight, so I'll do my best to monitor the chat box as well as watching to see if anyone raises their hands. I'm not a very formal person, and I certainly want you to feel comfortable contributing to the discussion. That way we can all learn from your expertise and learn from each other. So let's get started. Read this quote. Remember to not only say the right thing in the right place, but far more difficult still to leave unsaid the wrong thing at the tempting moment. Ben Franklin. Ah, yes, our friend Ben. He had many sage words of wisdom, and I got to tell you, these are some of the hardest words of wisdom to follow. Conflict and emotionally charged situations are something that few of us are ever comfortable encountering, and yet they are a natural part of everyday life. Disagreement between spouses, siblings, or peers, parents and children, co-workers, and even individuals that we hardly know cannot be totally avoided. Have you ever dodged a conversation because you didn't want to get into an argument, or gone into a conversation knowing that things might not go well and certainly a disagreement will follow? You're not alone. Conflict and emotionally charged situations are something few of us are ever fully comfortable encountering, and yet they are a natural part of our everyday world. Arguments between spouses, between siblings or peers, parents and children, and sometimes people we don't know cannot be totally avoided, regardless of how skilled we are at dodging or resolving conflict. It is inevitable that we will be challenged by confrontational situations from time to time. In our session tonight, we're going to recognize that conflict in families and society is normal. We're going to identify patterns that can encourage peaceful conflict resolution in the home and in society. We're going to recognize how exposure to violence can affect children and learn how to hold family meetings. These will be one of the strategies that we teach you tonight. So think about this. Can you remember some of the typical fights and disagreements you had as a kid? Well, I can remember some that I had. Who's going to sit in the front seat ranks right up at the top of the most memorable ones. And even my grandchildren have that disagreement. And it is usually one where the parent just has to say, either the first one to get there gets that seat, or the oldest always sits in the front, or what other way you might decide to handle that. But it's an age-old disagreement. Maybe it's something as simple as getting the biggest piece of cake or somebody cutting in line at the drinking fountain. Well, now we have water bottle fountains. Sometimes these disagreements might even end up in name calling or a little scuffle, a bloody nose, or a black eye was the ultimate infractions. Well, infractions, those are the good old days, right? Yeah, those are the good old days. So here's what we know, here's how we know what conflict looks like. Fighting siblings, misunderstandings, work disputes, religious disbeliefs, divorce. I've had a couple of those. Hurt feelings, different ideas, political beliefs, and overall anger. But now more than ever, the consequences have changed over time. I mean, it's taken on a whole new dimension. All we have to do is watch the nightly news or follow social media to hear about disagreements that end in injury, death, division, or just plain anger. So once upon a time, people got into shouting matches and they called names and they used cuss words and they'd have a fist fight and somebody would end up with a bloody nose or a black eye. We remember those days, right? But now our disagreements are ending in brutal beatings and road rage, hate, jail time, physical injury, and even death. Times have definitely changed. I'm not saying that none of the things that used to happen in the past happen now, they do. But now it seems like everything is so much more intense and it's taken a step up or down, depending on how you look at it. So why is all this so important? We know that conflict styles are formed in early childhood. Remember remember that saying that said, you know, we're going to parent our children the same way our parents parented us? Well, that's very true today. We learned our earliest conflict resolution skills at home from our parents or whoever was taking care of us. And now that we have children and grandchildren, we're passing those same skills along to them, unless we intentionally took an opportunity to learn new conflict resolution skills. Otherwise, we're going to do conflict resolution the same way we observed it being done as we were growing up. And unless we do something intentional, such as watching this video right now, then this will give you new ways to solve conflict and new strategies to teach your children. Our world is very diverse now, and there is a need to contribute in a positive way. And this is one of the ways that we can do that. So let's think about something. If we were all together in a room, I would do this as an activity, but we're going to do it this way instead. So think about your home environment. You might have what you consider to be a peaceful home, or you might have a more conflicted home. So these are the two categories of home environments that we're going to talk about. Now, I will say that when I think about my own home, and this is what I want you to do, I want you to think about your home. My home, in all honesty, is never 100% peaceful, and that's normal. On the flip side, it's not 100% conflicted either. We have days where nobody fights. Everybody gets along and life is good. And then we have days where things are a little more challenging and they're more conflicted. So if we're going to teach our children to value and respect others, we must look much more deeply than to simple conflict resolution skills. We're getting ready to look at a list of characteristics of a positive home and a negative home. Not a negative home, but a conflicted home. Listen for these 4 things in each home: role modeling, dealing with anger, exposure to violence, and teaching children conflict resolution skills. We'll look at each of these categories in more detail as we go through the presentation. So let's think about the peaceful home. Here are a list of behaviors and descriptions that would apply to a peaceful home. Recognize some conflict in families is normal. Role model strong conflict resolution skills. People handle their anger in an appropriate manner. They make sure their actions reflect their values. They use firm, loving, discipline techniques and avoid forms of harsh physical punishment. They encourage a healthy expression of feelings and emotions. They teach respect for the needs, rights, and beliefs of others, and they value diversity in their friendships. In a peaceful home, it's not uncommon for parents or caregivers to monitor children's television watching. They do not allow the use of violent toys or video games. They teach conflict resolution skills intentionally to their children. They prohibit physical and verbal abuse among siblings. Recognize that sibling rivalry is normal and it provides an opportunity for children to learn social skills. Encourages open communication, holds children accountable for their actions, and finally, teach children the risks of drugs and alcohol. That's a long list of the characteristics of a peaceful home. But did you see these 4 phrases come up? Role modeling, dealing with anger, exposure to violence, and teaching children conflict resolution skills. I think that did come up a few times. Now, here are some characteristics of a conflicted home. Remember, you're looking for role modeling, dealing with anger, exposure to violence, teaching children conflict resolution skills. I'm sorry. I just had to check something for a minute. And so we're looking for the same phrases here, and that way we can think about how they're different in each home environment. So in the conflicted house, we have exhibits a high level of conflict. Anger is expressed inappropriately. Parents and caregivers send mixed messages. They tend to be too controlling or too permissive. They often resort to physical punishment. They allow inappropriate expressions of feelings, and they provide little restrictions on television viewing. They also allow physically and verbally abusive behavior among siblings. So, did you hear those phrases? Role modeling, dealing with anger, exposure to violence, and teaching children conflict resolution skills? So did I, but they were in the opposite form of what we heard in the peaceful home. So let's talk about the first one of those skills. And that was role modeling. While our children have many role models in their lives, parents are clearly the most powerful influence. Remember that saying that we parent the same way we were parented? just like we talked about a minute ago. Well, that's still true here. We tend to handle conflict and emotions the same way our parents did. However, if you do things like taking classes about handling conflict resolution, and then you try to apply those strategies within your home, then you can change that cycle. And it's a new cycle. If we were raised with parents who handled conflict well, then we might have adopted that model. Likewise, our children will also learn our strategies from us. It is critical that children learn from their most important role models a respect for the rights, properties, and feelings of others, as well as a respect for and value for the belief systems that are different from their own. So think about it for a minute. I'm so sorry. Think about your most important role models and write down ideas of how they might promote this type of, they might have promoted this type of respect within the home. And how might you model this type of respect in the home? Well, some of the things that I see in the chat box are right on track. You can model responsible behavior and attitudes on a daily basis. Share openly within the family your values and beliefs. Treat others with respect. Demonstrate respect for varying beliefs, cultures, and differences. Discuss openly as a family acts of injustice, prejudice, and violence which occur in society. And we see those all the time on social media, in the news, and lots of other resources also. Develop friendships with people from other cultures, races, and abilities, and encourage your children to do the same. Practice conflict resolution skills in your home. Today, we know that exposure to mild parental conflict can be healthy for children. What positives do you think can be gained by that kind of exposure? So the question is, what positives can be learned from children if they see adults working through conflict? There is an age-old argument. Should children see their parents argue? It's important for children to recognize that conflict is normal and that people can love and respect one another and still have differing opinions and viewpoints. Learning appropriate ways to handle conflict is important. The critical key is that mom and dad need to model creative responses to conflict and to express love and respect for each other, both during and following the arguments. Disagreements of a more serious nature should be kept behind closed doors. However, you should know, and you probably already do, that children of all ages can tell when there's a fight going on. So just remember that it is okay to argue in front of your children as long as you're still showing love and respect, even though you have different viewpoints, and that you're modeling appropriate ways to handle conflict, and that you show your love and affection before and after the argument has been resolved. We want our kids to see us first in that disagreeable stage, and then again in that stage where we love each other and everybody gets along. So when parents fight, we need to make sure that and if we're letting our children watch, we need to make sure that the disagreement is worth fighting. Sometimes I don't want to die on that hill and I'm just not going to do it. And sometimes it is worth fighting and it needs to be handled behind closed doors. So you just have to distinguish when to disagree in private and when it's okay to have your disagreement in front of the kids. Stick to the issue. Don't drag up things that happened 10 years ago. And compromise, negotiate, and collaborate with your spouse or significant other or other family member. So being able to bend as appropriate, being able to compromise is a valuable skill that children need to learn to use throughout the rest of their lives. Keep in mind, in a family, there shouldn't be any losers. And of course, draw closure with an expression of love and affection. Now, there are some do's and don'ts when you're dealing with anger. Remember, that was one of the other things that we said we were going to talk about tonight, dealing with anger. So, do's and don'ts. Do stay calm, try to understand your motives, be assertive through negotiation and compromise, seek help when positive efforts aren't working, but don't get personal, like, don't get personal and like calling names or, hitting below the belt, as they say. Don't avoid the issue. Don't make accusations or attacks. Don't sulk or try to get even. Now, when someone else is angry, there are some very important steps for us to take. Keep your cool. Be considerate. Encourage the person to talk. Be a good listener and show empathy. Look for the underlying cause of the anger and offer possible solutions if and when you can tell that the other person is open to your suggestions. Expressing anger constructively or channeling it appropriate are the tools for building trust, respect, and mutual understanding. Unmanaged conflict and emotions can take a heavy toll on everyone involved. Okay, now, before we move into the next section, we're going to do a little demonstration. And again, I'm sorry we're not all together because I would give you a candy bar to eat. And I would just say, enjoy it. So you think about which candy bar you would like. Now, did you know how many calories are actually in a candy bar? Look at this. My favorite is Rolo. A whole roll of Rolo, 233 calories. My husband's Reese's Peanut Butter Cups, 222 calories. Now, my second favorite is a York Peppermint Patty. That's only 149. So I don't feel quite as guilty when I eat a York Peppermint Patty. And those are the large ones, not the little ones that you get in the packages. So if this is the only candy bar that I eat all week, it's not significantly going to affect my weight, my cholesterol, my dental health, or anything else. So one candy bar isn't going to kill me. However, what would happen if I ate a steady diet of candy bars? That's a little different. Obviously, my weight would go up, so would my cholesterol, my dental health would decrease, Everything about my body and my health overall would be affected in a negative way. So think about this. Frequent exposure to violence and conflict takes a similar toll on children. Keep this in mind as we talk more about exposing children to violence. So think about, where do you think children get most of their exposure to violence? Is it in your home? Or is it from the world? Well, in some cases, it's both. We know from the candy bar demonstration that children can have a steady diet of negative influences through TV, video games, toys, music, and even more devastating verbal and physical violence at home. Over time, they become desensitized to violence and are likely to exhibit aggressive, violent behaviors themselves or develop emotional problems. Even one-time exposures can have negative impacts on behavior, sleep patterns, appetite, and more. So exposure to violence is a real problem in our world these days. So earlier we talked about how students are exposed to violence, and some of our responses included social media, video games, TV, whether it's streaming or regularly scheduled programs, movies, toys, peers, family, etc. TV and video games are certainly at the top 3. Here are some tips for helping combat the steady exposure to violence. First, limit TV viewing for all family members, TV and video game viewing. Children should not watch more than 1 hour per day. And on school days, it might even be, watching TV might even be eliminated or the time shortened on school nights. Okay, so I know this is a hard one. It's really hard. You know, when I was growing up, I could watch TV maybe from after school until bedtime with some interruptions here and there. But most of the time somebody was home and they knew what I was watching. And let's face it, we only had 3 channels to choose from. So it wasn't such a bad problem. However, these days when we have video games and social media and live streaming of shows at all ratings, it is more of a problem. So carefully select what to watch and help your children make good choices when they're choosing what to watch. Then watch some of your child's favorite programs with you. That's going to give you a good idea of what all they're being exposed to, if anything in the nature of violence or negative behavior. You can use television viewing as a springboard for discussion about values and fantasy versus real life, conflict and violence, commercialism, etc. You can use open-ended questions, and those are questions that have a deeper answer than yes or no. They're not yes or no questions. Discuss TV violence. Talk about more appropriate means for solving conflict, respecting the rights of property and feelings of others. Discuss cause and effect. Number 6, encourage high quality programming and explain your selections. Point out appropriate TV selections that can be very educational as well as enjoyable. Ban programs that you feel are inappropriate. As a parent, this is not only your right, but your responsibility. Be a good role model in your own viewing. Find constructive alternatives to watching TV. Encourage outdoor activities, reading, art, hobbies, sports, creative play, family activities, all those things are often going to be more beneficial than watching TV. Teaching children or teens conflict resolution skills is critical. The earlier we can begin teaching our practical conflict resolution skills to children, the more skilled and creative they'll become at solving problems and resolving conflicts. This is very important. The earlier we start, the stronger their skills will be. So remember, conflict styles are shaped when we're very young. Siblings are generally the first challenges to conflict, and sibling rivalry is a whole different story, and we can try that in another session. But there are 3 things that all parents should keep in mind. Avoid becoming involved in your children's conflicts. Let them solve their own problems together. Encourage children to seek their own solutions to their disagreements, and prohibit any physical or verbal abuse. There are many conflict resolution styles, but most seem to have the same basic components. The following style is perhaps an easy one for children to remember, and its use of a hand signal makes it easy for parents to simply raise an open hand to remind children to use it. It's called the STOP strategy. So S stands for slow down and identify what the problem is. T stands for talk to each other with respect. O is be open to the other person's point of view. And P, plan a solution that is agreeable to all. And the hand signal, of course, is just raising your hand. Stop. This is not talk to the hand. This is stop before things get out of hand, and let's talk this through. So it's stop, slow down, talk, be open, and plan. Okay, so just 4 simple steps. Now, another strategy that you can use to teach your children to solve conflict peacefully is the strategy of having a family meeting. So we do this at my house from time to time. And so when we do this, we have the dining table. That's where we always meet. We try to have family meetings on Sundays, but sometimes we call an emergency family meeting during the week, or sometimes we go a couple of weeks without having one. But during this time, it's very important that all technology is put away. This meeting is an important time in our family. So one thing that you can do is put an agenda on the refrigerator, just a list, and say, okay, if there's something you want to talk about at the family meeting, then add it to the list, and then we'll be able to talk about it. So something else that's really important is that we give children an opportunity to be able to chair the meetings and, kind of be in the leadership role. This will give them an opportunity to practice greater responsibility and being in charge. It is important that the adult family members, parents or grandparents, whoever is in the home, that they model this a few times, because, it's not a game, and children can view it as such if they haven't seen what it's supposed to look like. Record the minutes of all your meetings and keep them in a notebook, and children can do that too. Hold your meetings around a cleared table to avoid distraction. Begin on a positive note, compliment people at the table to let them know that you noticed something that they were doing well. Be sure to address all the areas of concern that are on the agenda, and be sure that each family member has an opportunity to talk or bring up a topic. Now, sometimes you don't want your meetings to turn into gripe sessions, right? And so one of the things that you might end up having to do is limit your time 20 to 30 minutes and use a timer. And so, if it starts looking like it or sounding like it's going to turn into a gripe session, then you can say, okay, look, everybody, our goal is for this to not have a gripe session, but to come up with peaceful resolutions to our family problems. And so let's table this particular discussion until our next meeting. And we'll come back to this with some solutions. But you think about this between now and our next meeting and come back with some solutions. And then remember that remember to end your meetings with a fun family activity or game so that it always ends on a positive note. Well, speaking of ending meetings on a positive note, I want to share something with you. This is a poem. Well, actually, it's not a poem, it's a story. And it was written by Lauren Isley, a well-known author and poet who was working and vacationing on a beach in Spain at some point in his life. So he wrote this story. One morning, very early, he was walking along the beach. The sun was just rising. While enjoying the beauty about him, he glanced down the beach and saw a lone figure dancing about. Fascinated by this other person celebrating the day that was about to dawn, he moved closer. As he came nearer, he realized that the young man was not dancing at all, but in one graceful movement was picking up objects from the beach and was tossing them out into the sea. As he approached the young man, he saw that the objects were starfish. Why in the world are you throwing starfish into the water? The young man replied, if the starfish are still on the beach when the tide goes out and the sun rises higher in the sky, they will die. And the man continued to toss them out to sea. That's ridiculous, the man said. There are thousands of miles of beaches and millions of starfish. You can't believe that what you're doing could possibly make a difference. The young man picked up another starfish, paused thoughtfully, and remarked as he tossed it out into the waves, it makes a difference to this one. And, nothing could be more true at this point. Your child may be one child or however many you have in the family. But by teaching your child or children, teens, these conflict resolutions, strategies, and skills, you're making a difference to them and how they communicate and how they work in the world beyond your home, as well as inside of your home. But it is going to make a difference in how they interact with the world for the rest of their life. You will be making a difference in the life of your very own child. And that is exactly what we all need to be doing, is influencing our children in positive ways to live the rest of their life. That concludes our presentation for today. But I do want to remind you that if you have not already signed in, you can type this link at the bottom of the slide into your web browser, and then you can fill out just a brief form letting us know that you were here and any suggestions that you might have. Again, I'm Kelly Rawl. I can be reached at KELLYRALL@HEBISD.edu, or that's my email address, or 817-399-2083. I hope you have a great rest of your week and that we see you again at some of our other family engagement and parent academy classes. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.